British-made weapons have punched far above their weight in Ukraine, from NLAW ambushes that stalled Russian armour at the gates of Kyiv, to storm shadow strikes that forced the Black Sea Fleet to rethink where it parks its ships, from Challenger 2s that have taken a beating and kept rolling, to Frankenstein hybrids that fuse Soviet-era launchers with modern Western missiles. British kit keeps showing up at the hinge points of this war. As President Volodymyr Zelensky put it when thanking the UK for long-range missiles, British support has significantly increased our capabilities at several points of this war. And on the battlefield, you can see it. I'm Tuomas, a former officer in the Finnish Defence Forces, and in this episode we'll map what the UK actually sent, how quickly it arrived, which systems made the biggest difference, and how they stack up against equivalents from other partners. Let's start with the money and the tempo. Since 2022, the United Kingdom has shifted from urgent early shipments to a sustained pipeline with real budget lines behind it, tens of billions of pounds in committed military support, a standing multi-year pledge of several billion per year moving forward, and innovative financing tied to Russian assets that keeps new capability flowing without month-to-month politics. Crucially, in comparison to other countries, Britain has coupled announcements to deliveries. As waves of artillery ammunition, barrels, and spares arrived, London added newer layers, like ground-launched anti-air systems using air-to-air missiles for point-air defense and expanded drone packages where they assist Ukraine with British factory capacity. The result is a steady supply of Russian-beating equipment, frontline weapons to halt advances, artillery to shape the line, and deep-strike missiles to take out hardened command bunkers far behind the lines. All told, the UK has provided about £22 billion in support to Ukraine when you include refugee assistance, making Britain the third largest donor after the United States and Germany. On a GDP basis, the UK ranks 12th, at roughly 0.7% of GDP. But headline totals can mislead. As I've noted in other videos, the US often values weapons aid at higher replacement costs, while the UK, France, and many European countries value equipment more conservatively. If London priced its military aid the way Washington does, the perceived size of UK support would look significantly larger. As with our video on Sweden's weapons in Ukraine, we'll start with the tanks. Ukraine received 14 Challenger 2s from the UK in late March 2023, and they've built a reputation for being brutally hard to kill. Across the war, visually confirmed losses show 2 destroyed, with no confirmed cases of capture or abandonment, and a small number damaged and later recovered and repaired, a markedly lighter loss percentage than many other Western main battle tanks in similarly intense sectors. Ukrainian crews have consistently praised the tank's crew survivability thanks to its compartmentalized ammo storage and robust Chobham armor, excellent fire control and optics for first-round hits, and crew-friendly ergonomics that keep fatigue down on long missions. Even when damaged by mines or drones, as seen in this video where the Russians attempt to cook off a Challenger over and over, multiple accounts describe crews walking away and vehicles being brought back into service after a few battlefield repairs, reinforcing the perception that Challenger 2 can take punishment, save its crew, and return to the line, which is ultimately the metric that matters most in Ukraine's style of attritional, drone-saturated warfare. In a perfect world, the UK would have more of these to send to Ukraine, but as most of their fleet is currently being upgraded to Challenger 3, that seems off the table. It could be worth testing version 3 in Ukraine as these roll off the production lines, but I'm doubtful that this will happen. Ukraine began fielding the Vickers-made AS-90 howitzer in 2023, and it quickly earned a reputation as a hard-hitting, operator-friendly gun. Despite its age, crews praised the AS-90's fast burst rate, solid fire control, and protected crew compartment that lets them shoot and scoot under counter-battery threat. In an artillery war where survivability and tempo matter as much as raw range, the AS-90 delivers. In total, the UK has delivered just under 90 of this iconic SPG to Ukraine. For loss figures, 16 AS-90s have been visually confirmed destroyed and 6 damaged in Ukrainian service. But that's a reflection of how hard they've been worked on the hottest fronts, not a verdict on the platform. Versus Western peers, it sits in a useful middle ground. It doesn't have the digital refinement of a PZ-H-2000 or the highway sprint of a Caesar or Archer truck gun, but it's tougher than wheeled systems when shells start landing and less maintenance sensitive than some high-end, newer platforms. When we look at loss ratios, its 18% destroyed rate is a lot smaller than the loss ratios reported for, in example, the similar-aged American-made M109, where 88 out of the 150 or so delivered have been destroyed. The AS-90 is not the newest kid on the block, but Ukraine has proved that British-made artillery can still be among the best on the battlefield, even at a ripe old age of close to 30 years. With sensible sustainment, barrels, spares, and trained crews, these guns have extended Ukraine's counter-battery reach, kept pressure on Russian logistics, and absorbed punishment while getting their crews home. In a drone-saturated attritional fight, that balance of punch, protection, and practicality is exactly what wins time and territory. Perhaps the most exciting thing to come out of the UK during this war is their innovation in anti-air capability. The clearest example is Gravehawk, containerized short-range anti-air system that hides in a standard 20-foot container and fires cheap Soviet-era R-73 air-to-air missiles from the ground. 2 prototypes were trialed in Ukraine in September 2024, with 15 production units slated for delivery in 2025, 17 systems in total, specifically to give Ukraine a cheap, mobile way to hit Shaheds, cruise missiles, and low flyers without burning expensive SAM-class interceptors. As the UK Defence Minister's team put it, Gravehawk was rapidly developed for the armed forces of Ukraine and jointly funded by the United Kingdom and Denmark, a deliberate push to turn massive Soviet-era Ukrainian missile stocks into ground air defense at speed. If you thought the makers of floating tanks full of gadgets for the D-Day landings were done there, you're wrong. For the UK's other Frankenstein improvisation, Raven is a similar ground-launched anti-air system using old ASRAAM missiles on Supercat trucks, which Kyiv has already used to rack up hundreds of missile kills. Raven is built with UK industry and has, as of July, logged 400-plus engagements with a 70%-plus success rate against missiles, evidence that fast, low-cost adaptations can change the air picture. The UK is now adding more of these funded from Russian asset interest and increasing the amount of batteries to 13. Perhaps the most deceptively important piece of kit in the early days was the NLAW, a Swedish-British collaboration that turned out to be a war changer, as Vladimir Putin thought it'd be a good idea to pile several thousand armored vehicles into Ukraine at once. Developed by a collab between Saab and BAE Bofors in Sweden, the missile was produced and assembled through a UK industrial consortium with the main factory in Belfast under Thales, so delivery could scale fast. In practice, that meant design and software pedigree from Sweden with mass assembly and supply chain muscle in the UK, and Saab rapidly expanded capacity after 2022 from pre-war production rates to a much larger output to meet demand. Crucially, the NLAW arrived in numbers and at the right moment. It's a single-soldier, fire-and-forget top attack weapon that needs almost no training and is brutally effective in built-up and broken terrain, exactly the conditions Ukrainian infantry faced in the first weeks, where the NLAW was attributed to have taken out at least 40% of all armor losses for Russia. Ukrainian commanders and frontline fighters repeatedly singled it out, simple to use, reliable, and devastating against tanks operating in almost any condition. Importantly, it meant that Russia had to adapt from trying to overrun Ukraine into more situational warfare. One of Britain's biggest, and likely least flashy contributions is Operation Interflex, the UK-led multinational training pipeline that has turned raw Ukrainian recruits into field-ready soldiers and officers at scale. Launched on June 26, 2022, Interflex is run on British soil, using ranges and camps across the country, and brings in instructor teams from 13 partner nations alongside the British Army. As of mid-2025, more than 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers have completed the program, making it the largest British-run military training effort since the Second World War and the backbone of Ukraine's replacement and refresh cycle. Britain is hosting the majority of the training. Courses run at multiple UK sites with a British core cadre and rotating allied instructors from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Denmark, my colleagues in the Finnish Defence Forces, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Albania, Estonia, Kosovo, Lithuania, and Romania. By the start of next year, the combined teams expect to have trained well over 100,000 soldiers, and they're getting the best of what all of these allied nations can offer. Winter training from the Nordics, trench warfare specialities, and personnel tactics from the Commonwealth, as well as hard-fought experience from nations who border Russia and have experienced Russian brutality. The courses are practical and constantly adapting. A compressed intensive basic combat course, originally 5 weeks long, that now includes extra modules on trench and urban fighting, led by special operators from Canada, the UK and Norway, small unit tactics, Finnish mortar doctrine, battlefield medicine, drones and counter-drone warfare, and importantly, the laws of armed conflict. The logic behind the UK's decision to do this is quite simple. Equipment only matters if there are trained crews to use it and new formations ready to replace losses. Operation Interflex provides Ukraine with a steady, disciplined stream of soldiers who can immediately integrate into Western-supplied units and operate the equipment donated by the Allies. And out of all of the UK's investments in their own security and defence, this is likely the one which has had the biggest effect for many, many years. The British-French Storm Shadow or Scalp missile has been Europe's most consequential long-range contribution to Ukraine, an operational-level missile that changed where and how Kyiv could strike. London and Paris confirmed deliveries in May 2023, and within weeks, Ukraine was hitting high-value targets far behind the front, most dramatically around Crimea. The effect was both physical and behavioral, damaged repair docks, command nodes, and berthed warships, and a Russian Black Sea fleet forced to disperse and harden its rear areas after its headquarters got hit by the British and French-supplied missile. Operationally, Storm Shadow's value is its blend of range, low observable cruise profile, and precision. Paired with Ukrainian ISR, decoys, and timing, it repeatedly penetrated areas Russia assumed were safe, forcing costly relocations and tying down air defense assets that would otherwise cover the front. Even after high-profile strikes like the Sevastopol dry dock attack that destroyed the submarine Rostov-on-Don, the most telling metric wasn't a single explosion, but a sustained shift in Russian posture, with ships moved to Russian ports, HQs, and high command destroyed. Now I could go on about the gear I haven't covered: Starstreak, the new British-built drones rolling out of UK factories, or the anti-air lasers in testing. But the most important thing the UK brings to the table, in my humble opinion, is political stability for Ukraine. I think we all shudder a little remembering the tense White House moment earlier this year with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump outright ambushing Zelensky. What steadies that kind of turbulence is how other allies, especially the UK's current and former leadership, step in as a bridge between Kyiv, Washington, and Europe. And it isn't only the current government that carries the load. Boris Johnson's early backing matters. He pushed hard for lethal aid and became the first G7 leader to visit Kyiv while fighting raged outside the city. Whatever you think of their domestic politics, both Conservative and Labour prime ministers keep pulling the wider Western alliance together behind Ukraine, a credit not just to their governments, but to the British public that sustains that support. When you add it up, the red line is impact, not volume. Britain's support to Ukraine isn't only about military aid. While their equipment has been very important, other things likely take first place. Operation Interflex trains a large part of Ukraine's new soldiers, and the political support that the UK has given Ukraine since day one of this war is likely the most important. British kit isn't the newest or flashiest. What's important with it is that it arrives, it works, and it saves lives. And Britain keeps innovating things like the Raven and Gravehawk to make do with what Ukraine already has. That's partly why 2 years on, Ukraine's fight still holds, and why the UK remains one of the large reasons it does. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video, and to my British viewers, thank you for your unwavering support for Ukraine and for the wider eastern flank against Russia. It's reassuring to know that through both Jeff and NATO, we can count on the UK to have our backs.